Hello,
Hey everybody,
gentlemen.
Yolanda.
The connected relationship.
We are.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what we do.
Yeah. Connect
We
in
connect.
relationship.
In relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, today we're going to talk about something that is super personal for us.
Right.
And one of the things that happens in relationships that I don't hear talked about very, very much. I don't know if you.
No, I can't say that I have.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think it's something that has like a profound impact on a relationship.
Totally.
Right? I
Totally.
mean, we're talking about when your partner has like a chronic health condition.
Yeah, when there's a chronic condition that is at play in the relationship.
Right.
One
Because,
of the partners or both.
or
Even.
both, right? Yeah. But I mean, it tends to be the kind of thing that literally changes everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it changes how you look at the world sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it has that kind of power, right?
Mm-hmm. So these conditions might be physical,
Sure.
right? They might be medical.
Sure.
They might be emotional,
Yeah, absolutely.
mental health diagnoses. It can kind of run the spectrum, but it's kind of one of those invisible illness kind of situations where people can look at you from the outside and say, but you don't look sick, so what's
Right.
going on?
Right. I mean, I guess you could even lump in like addiction and things like that, right?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Any kind of thing that's chronic like
Right.
that, and how the stress and strain and the redefining it puts on a relationship.
Yeah.
Particularly, two people that are a couple.
Yeah.
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 It's hard on a relationship.
Mm-hmm. It's a huge adjustment, not just at the beginning, but kind of ongoing. And so for us, that looked like, we met each other when we were 16 years old.
Knee high to a grasshopper.
So we were both super healthy,
Right.
at the time. And it was about 8 years into our relationship when I was diagnosed with some medical conditions, some chronic health conditions, psoriatic arthritis, and then that kind of anything autoimmune kind of
Right.
builds from there. So that
Right.
was the first one, and then a lot others over a period of time. And so that was a unique. Some relationships, the chronic health or the chronic condition is at play from the beginning,
Right.
and so
right.
you kind of factor that in as you're getting to know each other and dating and that kind of thing.
Well, I think it's the included equation, right? You look at it and you're like, okay, I can account for this.
Right.
I think it's a little harder when the diagnosis comes later, and it's you're like, wow, I don't know that I signed up for all that.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, obviously,
In sickness and in health,
Right.
but,
but
Yeah.
it can kind of like make you reevaluate
Well,
what
and
you think.
it's interesting too because for a lot of people that have chronic conditions, it's not like it poof is there overnight. Like
Right.
you've been dealing with some symptoms or some form of
Right.
whatever's been going on for a period of time, and so that moment of diagnosis, it's kind of a mixed bag of like, oh,
Right.
finally we have,
I have a language that I can put around it,
Right.
which is important. I
Right.
can identify it, which is
Right.
very important.
right,
you
right.
know.
And then, what is life going to look like? Just
Right.
what is life in general going to look like, and what does this look like for our relationship?
Absolutely, because I think these things, from a relational standpoint, have the ability to redefine everything.
Yeah.
You got to kind of, well, what does it mean we can't do all the things we were doing, or
Yeah.
what does it mean, you can't do that or partake in this, or
Yeah, and especially again when from the outside, the partner,
everything looks fine.
everybody
Right.
it looks healthy.
Right.
And I know from my own experience, our experience, and I'm working clinically with people as a therapist with people who have chronic conditions. There is like a grief that happens.
Absolutely.
So there's some form of relief oftentimes, but then also like a grief and that whole grief cycle
Right.
that you go through. And that's not a one and done thing. That
Right.
is
That's going
like
to go on forever.
the grief cycle in that moment. And then when there's an additional diagnosis or
Right.
when there's a new symptom,
Right.
so it comes up again and again and again.
Right, and depending on how severe it is, it could be much worse. Like, something is terminal or whatever. But it's kind of like there's those moments in your relationship that are re-identifying moments.
Yeah.
Like, you date and then you get married. And when you're married, now you're a whole new thing. And it's a redefining moment, right? And then maybe you have kids, and the world is completely different again because it has its own identity and its own form and function. And everything changes.
Yeah.
You know, and there's those moments through life that are always redefining, and you kind of come out of it. I've always kind of held to that. Really strong couples learn how to redefine, and they kind of embrace that, and they move forward in that, and that helps them draw closer.
Right.
It's the ones that are like, oh, well, that's not the guy I married, or you know, they've changed, and you know that.
And I think in those redefining moments that you described, those are moments that you choose. And
Absolutely.
when there's a diagnosis,
right? I was going to say the difference here is being you don't necessarily choose this, but it's absolutely another re-identifying moment, and it's going to force you to restructure your identity as a relationship. You know?
Yeah, just practically,
right.
You know, and the things that you do, the things that you enjoyed before.
Absolutely.
There's some changes there. But then also as you kind of work through it together emotionally and relationally, and it takes a lot of open communication of, you know, how's this impacting you?
Right.
And I don't know. I don't know what your experience, you know, has been on like the partner side of things.
Right. I think it's all the above, right? It can be frustrating. It can be something that draws you really close at times. You know, it's scary. You know, it's all the feels. And I mean, and I'm sure as being a person going through it, it's the same way.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, you're worried for your partner. You're worried for what the future looks like. You mourn what may, or grieve what may not become that you thought was going to be.
Yeah,
that's
that's the weird part of that grief, because usually we think of grief as the loss or death.
Right.
But then I think a lot of times in these situations, it's the grief of what you had thought might be.
Your hopes and dreams maybe look different.
Right.
And those are those things when I'm talking about re-identifying, that's what I'm talking about. Like working through all that and go, oh wow, what do we look like now? You know, what things can we attain? What things can we do? And I think this is a very real topic for a lot of couples.
Yeah.
And I think it's a hard one for couples to struggle through.
Yeah.
And I will say, being on the partner end of it, it doesn't always come with a lot of understanding. Like, I don't understand why you're tired and don't feel good and don't want to go do all the things we've done all the time. Right. So it's challenging.
And I think it is kind of saying like that, I don't understand, and I'm trying to, but you know, and it's hard, and you know, can we talk through it and you can help me understand, right? I think that there is a lot of that internal like struggle back and forth when you are the person with the diagnosis, because you want things to be normal, and you're trying all the things, and you know, you're like, it's never gonna be normal. So
but what's normal, right?
You're trying to recreate, or you're trying to create a new normal. And I think that in these situations, it's kind of the tendency for the person with a diagnosis to have more focus, just by proxy of their doctor's appointments and like,
they're a little more in the know, so they're a little more in the. Okay, this is where we're going, what's going on. And I do think the partner can be kind of like, well, what the hell's going on? You know?
And I think that it is being intentional to sit down with one another to say, hey, talk to me about how this is impacting you.
And I think that's tough because we don't necessarily get there all the time. Because we're so ingrained in, oh my God, how do we
try
fix
to make
it?
things better.
And you know, we don't really give ourselves the space to kind of say, wow, what does this kind of look like for us, and how is it affecting you in our relationship?
And I think you know, at each of those, you know, moments of like, okay, well, this is where things are with this diagnosis today. What is that? How do we adjust the things that we do and the way that we connect with each other in this moment? Right now, I'm very thankful because I'm in a good spot, you know, and so thankful. Like every day, I'm so thankful. And so we're able to do things differently now than we did even 3 years ago. Right. And I don't take it for granted that it can't change
back, right?
any
or make
direction,
go worse, or
right?
Anything.
And just knowing that when or if and when that happens, then we still have that framework to sit down to say,
Right.
okay, so here's where things are.
Right.
It sucks.
Right.
Let's be in like this sucks kind of space.
Right. It's that rolling with the punches kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here's the punch. How do we roll with it, and how do we adjust to it?
Well, and how do you sit in the space of saying like, yeah, this sucks? I mean, because I think unless you recognize like none of us signed up for this, and this sucks, and we wish it were different. That's a big moment of connection too.
Yeah, absolutely. They present interesting challenges that way for relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You can really come out of these kind of things close, or you can really come out of these kind of things, oceans apart.
And I think it's leading with gentleness and kindness and like really perspective taking on each side. Like I want to understand how this impacts you, and then you doing that. Like I don't quite understand. Can you help me?
And then I think there's a lot of celebrating the wins you get, and grieving over the losses you get.
Yeah, and kind of coming up with your own lingo.
Right.
There was a moment that we were having a conversation as a family, and I was like, "Well, I got these spoons." So it's still something that the kids talk about, having a better understanding after kind of using some of that language.
Absolutely.
And if you're not familiar with the spoon theory and you have a chronic condition, look that up.
I still think it sounds better with goats. I have so many goats.
Well, we have so many goats.
Right.
So that is just kind of part of what we do as couples coaches is take some of the things that impact relationships that we don't talk about.
Absolutely.
And let's start talking about them. Right.
Could you be amazed the kind of stuff you can work through and how close it can draw you to each other?
Right. By making the implicit explicit.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's our tip for today, guys.
Have a good week.